Hello and welcome, I'm King Gaudi from Sax Comprehensive, and in this video we will look at low notes, to be more precise, how to play them, some of the problems facing beginners, and what are some of the solutions. If you play lots of popular songs, you will soon realize that most of the notes that you use to play these popular songs fall within the middle range of the saxophone, and only occasionally would you need to go up high to play a high note or go down low to play a low note. And probably most of the songs that you play, you won't even need to play that low B flat. Above my head, you can probably just see there's a transcription there. It's a Sunny Stitch transcription. It has a fast run in it, a fast lick. And I'm learning that song in order to build up my speed. But that song, the lowest note is a low C. On the wall over there, you can probably see that's a Gerald Albright transcription. In that transcription, there's lots of saxophone techniques. You've got to play overtones in there. You've got to play a lot of altissimo notes. But the lowest note in that song is a low B, and it only occurs once in that entire song. So you could play lots of songs and not have to play low notes. If you're playing a song such as Charlie Parker's Body and Soul, then you will find within the first few bars you're going to have to play a low B flat. But that first low B flat happens at the end of a chromatic run. And when you play a low B flat at the end of a chromatic run, you're going to find that the note will actually behave itself. The problem actually comes when you have to start on a low B flat or start on a low note, or if you're jumping from a higher note to a low note, that's when you're going to have some of the problems. Especially if you're a beginner, because what you might find is when you play the low note doesn't come out, but in its place comes out a higher note. Maybe if you try to play the low B flat, what you're going to get is the B flat an octave above it, or even a higher note, a higher partial. So what can we do to ensure that when we play these low notes, they actually come out, and they come out with some consistency? The first thing that we need to consider is the equipment. Now, when playing the saxophone, when you press the octave mechanism, you press the octave key, what that does is to vent some air either at the top of the saxophone on the neck or at the side of the saxophone. And by venting that little bit of air, it allows you to play certain notes an octave higher. Now just imagine what would happen if you had a faulty pad and air was actually escaping underneath the pad. Then that would have the same effect as if you were pressing the octave key. You are venting air, and so when you play these low notes, the low notes wouldn't come out as they should. So you want to be at least confident that your saxophone is in a good or decent working condition. Another thing which is probably less likely is that when you play the low notes, you're not actually closing the tone holes. You're not actually pressing down the keys fully, and therefore air is escaping underneath the pads just as if it was a faulty pad, and therefore the notes are not sounding as they should. When you play these low notes, we use our little fingers, and our little fingers are the weakest fingers on the hand. And so when you play these low notes, maybe, granted it may be less likely, but maybe you're not pressing down these keys fully, air is escaping, and therefore the note is not sounding as it should. This saxophone is a Selmer Mark II, and when I bought it and took it home, the first thing I noticed was that this low C key, I have to press it down further than I did on my other saxophone to actually close the tone hole. On my other saxophone, it was just a small movement and the key was closed. This one I have to move it in further. So different makes of saxophones are different, and obviously if you play it a lot, you're going to get used to it. And so I had to get used to trying to get all of the keys to close at the same time to get the note to come out perfect the first time. Another thing that we need to consider, continuing on with equipment, is the mouthpiece setup. As saxophone players, we're all at different stages in our development. Some saxophone players have been playing for years and years, others have just started. We all have different embouchure strength, we all have different lung capacity, we all play different styles of music, we all play at different volumes. And therefore, the type of mouthpiece that we use and the strength of reed that we use will have an effect on the notes that we produce. Some musicians will use a hard reed, maybe a 3.5 or 4. They may use mouthpieces with a wide tip opening, a number 7 or a number 8. And that will work fine for them. But for us, it may not be ideal for us at our stage in our development and our style of playing. So we want to make sure that the mouthpiece and reed that we are using is ideal for us. If you use a harder reed, then it means that when you try to play that reed, you're going to bite down on the mouthpiece. And when you bite down on the mouthpiece, what's going to happen is that there's going to be a tendency for the sound produced to jump to a higher partial. So maybe when you play that low B flat, it may jump to the octave above or a higher note. Now, if you play with a tight embouchure, then what you're going to do, you're going to get your neck and your mouthpiece, and then you're going to adjust it to get your saxophone in tune according to the embouchure which you have. So once you've adjusted the mouthpiece on the neck and the saxophone is tuned to your embouchure, it will play in tune. But when you go to play these low notes, because you have a tight embouchure, then what's going to happen is there's going to be a tendency for those low notes to jump to a higher partial, and maybe you're not going to be able to get those lower notes to come out. So what you might want to do is to make sure that you are not biting down on the mouthpiece, or make sure that you have a reed that is best suited for yourself. Now, one way to help you from not biting down on the mouthpiece, and that is to use a double lip embouchure to practice with, to start off with. This is a suggestion that I found online, which, it might be helpful for you. And basically the suggestion goes that instead of using your normal embouchure, now I'm assuming you have a single lip embouchure where your lower lip is slightly over your bottom teeth and your top teeth is in contact with the top of the mouthpiece. And obviously your top lip covers it. So what you're going to do if you use this type of embouchure, you're going to use a double lip embouchure. So instead of your top teeth being in contact with the top of the mouthpiece, you're going to raise your top teeth off the mouthpiece just slightly. Just raise your top teeth off the mouthpiece, and that way the mouthpiece is only being held by your lips. So your bottom lip is still over your bottom teeth, but the top lip is in contact with the top of the mouthpiece, and your top teeth is raised above, so it's not in contact with the mouthpiece. Now, it might be difficult to keep the saxophone steady by doing it that way, but if you use that double lip embouchure, then you won't be able to bite down. The only reason why you bite down is because your top teeth is in contact with the top of the mouthpiece, and therefore your bottom teeth has got something to push against. If your top lip is the only thing on top of the mouthpiece, then your bottom teeth has got nothing to push against, and therefore less likely to bite down. So that way you can practice like that and develop a better embouchure, and then go back to your normal embouchure. So you're trying to reduce the amount of pressure that you actually put on the reed. And then once you've done that, then go back to your normal embouchure. The other thing that you can do is just to change the reed. Now, when I first started to play the saxophone, I had problems getting the low notes out, as I suppose most saxophone players had when they started playing. It's a normal thing. And I researched online how to get these low notes to come out, looked at various forums, because what would happen is sometimes the low notes would come out, sometimes it would come out as an octave higher, sometimes it would come out, but it wouldn't just sound right. There was something wrong with the note. But I was going through this phase at the time where I was using different types of reeds, experimenting with different types of reeds, different reed strength, different brands, trying to find which would be the ideal reed for me to use. And it just so happens that I came to a box which was in this case, it was a Rico Hemke, it was a Strength 2, it was a filed reed. I was experimenting between unfiled and filed reeds. So this one was filed, And when I put it in and played it, the low note came out without any effort, came out rich, deep, sounded fantastic. I was so amazed that I put in the old reed just to check. When I put in the old reed, having problems getting these low notes out. When I changed it back to this Rico Hemke filed reed, the note came out fine. So I realized very quickly in my development that just by changing the reed to a different brand, a different cut, a different strength, you may find that you're able to produce these low notes without any effort at all. Now, if you do have problems with biting down on the mouthpiece and applying too much pressure on the reed, and you do not want to try the double lip embouchure to try and reduce the amount of pressure that you apply to the reed, then maybe just practice with the mouthpiece alone. I have done a video, a product review for the JazzLab mouthpiece silencer, where you just use the mouthpiece and the silencer and go through some exercises just practicing on the mouthpiece alone. If you can get a correct pitch with the mouthpiece alone, then obviously that would help you with the low notes as well. Now, you will find on forums that some teachers will suggest that when playing low notes, you should loosen your embouchure or lower your jaw. Some teachers will say, no, keep your jaw in the same position, keep your embouchure the same, only make really minute changes as you move up and down the range. Some other teachers will say when playing these low notes, maybe move your jaw forward or your lower lip out a little forward. These all have merits within their own rights. I'm not going to say this one is the correct method, because if you look at musicians, you'll find that musicians use different techniques. You've got some musicians play low notes and higher with their embouchure the same. If you look at other musicians, you find that their jaw is moving backwards and forwards, up and down. It really does depend on what technique they actually adopt. Obviously, ideally, you would want your embouchure to stay the same as you move up and down the range. That would be the easiest way to play. But in real life, you may need to change your embouchure to produce these low notes. And if you do, then once you get these low notes coming out with consistency, then maybe later on you can perfect the way you actually play these low notes. The next thing that we want to consider is the movement of air into the saxophone. Now, when you play notes in the saxophone, you want to play with an open throat. This is especially true when playing low notes. What I mean by playing with an open throat is that you mimic the sensation as if you were speaking in a low voice, or singing a low note, or whistling a low note, or when you yawn, that kind of opens up your throat. So you're going to try and mimic that sensation when producing a note, because when you open up your throat, that causes the air to pass through your throat in a less restricted way. Another way of having this sensation of opening up your throat is to blow out warm air. Now, you may remember when you was on your first date and you wanted to check if you had bad breath, you would put your hand up to your face and then you'd blow out, and then you'd have a whiff to smell whether you had bad breath or not. It's the same kind of concept. You blow out warm air as if you were fogging up a mirror or a pane of glass. That kind of opens up your throat and allows the air to pass into the saxophone, less restricted, and therefore will help you to produce these low notes. Another thing that you can try is to put your tongue in a low position, as if pronouncing the syllable R, where your throat and your tongue is in a low position. That will actually help you to get the low notes out. And obviously make sure you've got good posture. So if you're playing seated, then obviously make sure you're sitting straight up, or if you're standing straight up. If your head is down, then it's actually going to restrict the airflow in your neck. So make sure you're conscious about the flow of the air coming out from your throat. When playing notes on the saxophone, you want to make sure that you have a good air support. This is especially true for low notes because you're going to have to blow the air through the entire length of the saxophone. When you blow into the saxophone, the sound comes out of the closest tone hole that is not closed. So if you were to say play a C sharp where you don't press down any of the tone holes, then the sound will come out first from this unclosed tone hole. It will come out some of these other open tone holes, travel down the saxophone and come out the bell, but less sound will come out the bell because most of the sound are coming out of these open tone holes. Therefore, when you mic up your saxophone, you'll have one mic pointing towards the bell to get the sound coming out of the bell, but also you'll have another mic pointing towards these upper tone holes because a lot of the sound will come out of these top tone holes. Now when you play a low note, you're actually closing off these tone holes, which means that the sound will travel down the entire length of the saxophone and come out to the bell, which means you're going to have to push more air into the saxophone to get the sound to come out of the bell. Now when you're playing low notes, make sure you relax. If you're tense in your shoulders, tense in your throat, that's obviously going to restrict the airflow coming out of your throat and will actually work against you producing these low notes. I know that if you're having problems playing low notes and you're playing from, say, a piece of sheet music and you know a low note's coming up, you may be a bit anxious whether that low note is actually going to sound correctly or whether it's going to be the octave above, and so that might put some tension in you, which will be counterproductive. So try and relax, and as with all things, the more you practice, the easier it will become. When you start learning to play the saxophone, you will face lots of problems. The low notes don't come out, the high notes don't come out, your sound sounds terrible. But to be honest, the more you play the saxophone, these problems will just disappear. Even if you're not practicing exercises devoted to overcome these particular problems, the more you practice the saxophone, the better your embouchure becomes, the stronger your embouchure becomes, and then you just find that naturally the things that you had problems with, you no longer have problems with them. I remember when I first started playing the saxophone and I first recorded myself, when I played my first song, it sounded good to me. But when I recorded it and listened back to it, it sounded terrible. And I couldn't believe how it sounded so bad. When playing it, it sounded good to my ears. But on the recording, it sounded terrible. So then I recorded it on my phone. So then I decided to get a Blue Yeti mic, recorded it on that, thinking it was the mic. Still sounded terrible. Got myself a different mic, different software to record it on. Still sounded terrible because it was basically me. My tone was terrible. But after a few years of playing, I can actually record myself now, and it sounding a lot better than what it did many years ago. So a lot of these problems over time, they will just disappear. But obviously, if you want to improve on these aspects quite quickly, then obviously do certain exercises that will actually help you to overcome these problems. So some of the exercises that you could do to help you get these low notes to come out. As was said before, it's easier to play the low B flat at the end of a chromatic scale. So what you can do for your first practice is to practice the chromatic scale. So start on a note that you can play well and then descend until you reach that low B flat. It's more difficult to jump to the low B flat. Now, usually in music, you're not going to really jump more than an octave down to the low B flat. So choose a note between the low B flat and the B flat above that, start on that note and then jump down to the low B flat, then go back to the note that you started on, jump down to another note, low note, go back to the note that you started on, and oscillate between the low B flat and the note that you're going to jump from. However, just playing drills like this can be quite boring, and so you really want to make it fun and an enjoyable exercise. So what you could do is, which is probably more better to do, is to practice some songs that have lots of low notes in it. Or if you have a lick that you can play, then transpose that lick down so the lowest note is the low B flat, and then play that lick. That would be more enjoyable for you to do. Well, hopefully you found this video helpful and informative. I know it was a lot longer than my other videos, but if you did find it helpful and informative, then obviously give it a like as usual and share with your friends. And if you're not yet a subscriber, then consider subscribing to this channel. And I shall see you soon in the next video. Stay safe. Bye-bye.